So it's Thursday afternoon where I am. I guess it's Thursday morning where you are, Charles. And welcome to the Required LinkedIn Live, where I'm going to be speaking today with Charles Causey from Agile Partnering. Charles, you want to introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, what you do.
Yeah, sure, absolutely, and thanks for having me here, Andy. I've been really looking forward to this. And yeah, Charles Causey. I live on the East Coast of the United States in Atlanta, Georgia, and I run a business called Agile Partnering. And we'll talk probably a little bit more about it later, but we're effectively a back office firm that makes it easy for UK-based staffing firms and other international firms to start up and scale up in the US. So all things back office is what I do.
Fantastic. And how did you get into this line of work, Charles?
I can need a deep breath for that one, but the short of it is I spent about 15 years in enterprise software here in the United States, and most of that was in the human resource technology space. I spent a little bit of time in marketing, but almost all of it was in the HR space. So worked for companies that some of your listeners are probably familiar with, like SAP, obviously, SuccessFactors, and then worked for a venture-backed company as well in the sector. So I was always in the HR tech sector, and then I always wanted to go start a business, basically, Andy, and I had a private equity buddy of mine come to me and another person who had direct experience in staffing. And so we decided to go launch that about 11 years ago. And not to riff for too long, but I'll say that when we launched the business, it was more of a staffing company. We were doing perm direct hire as well as some contract roles. And what I realized was that staffing is really important work, but I was not great at it, actually. What I was really good at was the back office side. And that's what ultimately sort of turned into what we have here today.
Fantastic. So, yeah, you've been through the trenches with the recruiters, and you know and understand their pain.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe it's masochistic, but you want to talk about payroll funding and complexities in the back office, that's my bailiwick. But asking me to actually go and perform the services of a staffing company, I've got a lot of respect. I mean, it's no hot smoke. It's hard but important work. And yeah, so I was there and I did that, and then we completely focused on the things that I personally just did best at the time, and that became Agile Partnering.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So the US market. So I think we're probably going to have a mixture of audiences today. So we're going to have people who, people are looking at doing the US market, people are already doing the US market from the UK, and potentially folk who are already there in the market. And so, but for those who are literally thinking about the US market and just starting, just give us a brief overview of the contract staffing market.
Sure. So if you're in the UK or elsewhere and you're thinking about the US market, first and foremost, you can always ping me or ping somebody on my team. We're happy to give you details about your niche sector because it's a massive market, right? But when I'll compare it to the UK, just because I think most of your listeners might have some appreciation of that. The US is a lot bigger. It's about $180 to $190 billion staffing market. The top 50 billion is taken up by only 5 companies. So there's some really big players at the top. But that means there's a huge long tail middle and small market within the staffing industry. There's basically the same number of small to mid-sized staffing companies in the US as the UK, even though the market's bigger. So relatively speaking, there is less competition. I'm not saying it's easy. I've not spoken with a single business owner yet who said it's easy, okay? But those are the facts. Those are the numbers. What really makes it attractive, though, for a lot of UK recruiters coming into the US is the ultimate profitability. And I can get a little more detail, but the punchline is if you take a UK-based business and they're doing the exact same work and they're doing it in the US, our estimates would be that it's probably 30 to 50% more profitable on the bottom line. And that's because of a mix of a few things. Number one, higher markups. So in the US, you got sort of like IR35, but you've got independent contractors and W-2s. You're looking at markups of 60% on average for W-2s, 45% on independent contractors. That results in a gross margin of somewhere around the 28 to 30% range. High profit firms will actually peak above that. You've also got higher velocity. We don't know what garden leave is. I'm hiring somebody here coming up shortly, and I got to wait 3 months for her to start. It drives me mad. But in the US, you get a lot higher velocity of placements, especially on the perm side, because it's only a 2-week notice period. So those are just a few of the things that make the US market really attractive for companies in the UK. Does that answer the question? Is that helpful?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the addressable market is 7x the UK, just to put it into context. So those are figures from SIA. So, and yeah, I mean, just makes it really, really attractive. And as you say, less competition. That doesn't necessarily mean it's easy. You're not just going to walk in there, and especially you're up against other things such as time zones and local competition and the like. So, yeah, but I think that's a great overview. What type of firms are you seeing coming to America at the moment?
Yeah, and on that one, I can speak from my anecdotal experience. The one thing I would just say to anybody listening is, and this is not going to be, I'm not breaking new ground here, but the importance of being niche in such a big market can't be overstated. So when we talk about what firms are being successful, the most important trait is they get niche, if not micro niche. I mean, coming in as a generalist, I think it's really challenging. Some of those niches that we see really kicking off are, and again, I would always start with like, what are you good at? But anything that's downstream from AI. So it doesn't have to be an AI developer. I mean, there's energy, there's utilities, there's advanced manufacturing, there's robotics. Some of these roles are really high pay rates, as you would expect. But there's also a lot of roles that are the tester levels, that are the almost like a maintenance level. You're looking at $30, $40, $50 pay rates. It's not this huge sizzle of AI, but there is a lot of downstream money going into that. Some of our fastest growing clients are in that sector. I'd also say life sciences, pharmaceutical, engineering, financial services. Those are just great sectors, period. They're not taking off like some of the others, but they're still growing in a healthy way.
I'm really impressed as well that you say niche, not niche. And you've obviously learned that to address your UK audience.
That's hysterical. I keep these little idioms. Somebody on my team recently said kettle of fish, and I'm like, I don't think that's. She researched it. It turns out it's Scottish, but anyways, I try to get the idioms right as best I can.
Yeah, no, you'll get there. You'll notice these these little anecdotes. In the UK at the moment, it's apparently really, really hot. So you'll probably get a few new ones about few what a scorcher and things like that will be coming through to you. Yeah. So typically you talked about the different types of employment, and from my understanding, having worked across the US supporting the sales teams, there's broadly maps out to the same as you'd have in the UK. You have your corp to corp contractors. We'd see that in the UK's limited companies, where people are generally on business on their own account. They provide specialist skills. They very much work on their own. They're not, and you run tests, I guess, to work out, does it apply in this category, or are they genuine W-2? We probably touched on 1099s and why they're such a great idea for staffing agencies. But you guys, I guess, have got plenty of experience about working out, this fits, this doesn't.
Yeah, we absolutely do. We could do a whole session on that. I don't know if anybody would show up for it, right? but the brief of it is this, and then I'll share a couple important points that would be like key takeaways. There's W-2 and independent contractor, very sort of similar to what you described with our 35, adjacent in Canada, T4s versus independent contractors. The tricky part about the United States really is that it's not as structured as it is in the UK. And in the UK, you can go to my understanding is you can go to independent contractor and a corp to corp, and they get to choose, which umbrella company they're going to get paid through. And there's a lot of flexibility in terms of how they're engaged. In the US, it's different. It's all on the employer. The employer's legal obligation is to properly classify the worker. And the classification laws vary based on the state, based on the nature of the work. And the government's losing out a significant amount of money right now due to misclassification. Therefore, audits are up, and therefore the risk is up. And so that's the nature of it. And you have to be careful. I would just say that I won't name names, but I know for a fact that there's been multiple back office providers that have told our UK clients, oh, it's just like the UK. The independent contractor gets to choose their classification. That's just legally wrong if you speak with any US attorney. And so you got to be really careful about how I'm not saying it's rocket science, but you do need to be mindful of it and make sure that you're doing it properly.
Yeah, and definitely cover yourself. The most popular route, though, as we see, is as well, because the clients generally are quite risk averse as well. So corp to corp is certainly less popular than W-2, and traditionally, that product would be provided under an employer of record model.
That's correct. So we, like, just for context, we provide agent of record, which is when we engage independent contractors, and employer of record. W-2 is definitely more popular for the larger groups because the larger clients want to avoid misclassification risk, which is the risk that we're talking about right now. You will see more independent contractors the higher the pay rate, the more sophisticated the operator. But you will absolutely see, especially the Fortune 100, even Fortune 500 level, you will see prohibitions against even engaging independent contractors.
Got you. So just I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but this is an interactive session. So you can just comment on the in LinkedIn underneath the comments, or on YouTube, I think, and it appears in our stream, and we'll happily answer any questions that you have as we go along. So just fire away. So Charles, EOR, quite a well-trodden route, and then if you're big enough, you probably build your own W-2 once you get to critical mass. But the theme of this is mind the gap, and I think what you guys have want to talk about, or certainly piqued my interest in this conversation, was what you've built. So I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about what you've built, why you built it, the problem that it solves.
Yeah, I absolutely love to do that. And as I explain this, maybe it's helpful for me to first talk about why to use an employer of record just a little bit, because there's absolutely a time and a space for that. And then we'll talk about, when is the time to graduate from that, which is a conversation that pretty much no employer of record really wants to have. So the employer of record model provides really, really solid financial value for an international staffing company entering the USA or Canada. And, it's, for all the reasons we just mentioned, it's a really attractive market. These founders want to come in, they want to generate gross margin there. By the way, the multiples when you sell a business, as you know, Andy, they're higher in the US than they would be relative in the UK. So there's all sorts of financial reasons to build. The problem is the back office obstacle. In the US, it is very complex. When you add it all up, you got workers' comp benefits, taxes like FICA, FUTA, SUTA. You have ACA compliance. You have payroll funding. Credit risk is a whole different animal, I think, in the US, because we don't have Companies House. It's very hard to get data on these companies, on private companies. You basically can't get it. So all those back office obstacles prevent founders from being able to focus on what I think are the only two things that matter: finding clients and making placements, right? Generating margin. And so that's where a really good niche employer of record can come in and really help, because, and we're not the only ones in the market, but a great employer of record that's specific to staffing can help a staffing company get started in 24 hours or less and handle all that so they can go start generating profit. So that's what we do on a regular basis every day of the week for our clients, is we help them do that. Great model, employer of record, great model when you're starting and you're scaling up, right? When you want to easily and profitably start and scale up in the US, but then you just nailed it, Andy. When you get to critical mass, right? And we're going to talk about what that critical mass is. At some point, I think the firm begins to transition, and you have to really begin to evaluate. You'll probably want to evaluate, does it make sense to build this in-house or not? So I'll pause there without talking for too long. All that makes sense?
Yeah, it certainly makes sense to me, and I think there's probably just one other gotcha I see from UK companies going to the US. So in the UK, the umbrella model is commoditized. It's very inexpensive, from a margin perspective compared to the US. And the thing that then really spooks people is this percentage, and then actually this is the pay rate and this is that. But then once you take in all of the insurances, once you take in the margin, the credit risk, etc., and then you apply it to your, as you talked earlier, around the average margins probably being significantly higher, probably double, if I'm being really candid about what you see. That's what most of my clients, percentage, and actually just the salaries being significantly higher as well. So I think a lot of people get stuck on, I'm paying this in the UK, why am I paying this in US? And the same in Europe as well. Yeah,
that makes sense to me. I talk a lot about a 3-phase roadmap for expansion in the US. Maybe I'll touch on that real quickly. Just you're getting me going on this. I've seen a number of staffing companies enter the US, and they throw a bunch of money into it, and they try to go really big, really fast. Some of them make it and a lot of them don't. And what I really encourage people to do is to really weigh the risk reward. And phase one is you can service the US market completely remotely. You do not even need a US entity. You don't need payroll funding. You don't need back office. You just need a good employer of record. Go make your first few placements, establish your foothold with your first 1, 2, or 3 clients. Go and get $10,000, $20,000 of gross profit per month rolling in, right? Prove out the beachhead, and then shift to what I call phase two, which is now incorporate your US entity. It'll probably be a foreign owned, entity. You can have your own contracts. You can begin to move yourself more forward in the client relationship. You still don't need boots on the ground though. You can have a US phone number, super easy. You could have that in 10 minutes, right? But now you begin to have your own US entity. You can begin to have a bank account and funding, recognize revenue in that entity. And then phase three is boots on the ground. Now it's time to invest. Let's talk about visas. Let's talk about actually growing. You can go through all those phases in 6 months or 6 years. In general, I don't see a big reason to just go all in. You can do this in a risk mitigated way and do that very, very quickly if you have the right back office partner.
Absolutely, and you can grow and at the scale that you fits and works, and just like I think risk mitigation is the perfect way of describing that.
Yeah, so, I spoke with a client last week. He's a fantastic guy. He's in life sciences. He's built a really successful. He's got multiple businesses, but he's got about 25 or 30 runners. Okay, we don't call them runners here in the U.S., but I've been hanging out with the UK folks too long. But I've got 25 or 30 contractors here, and he doesn't have a single employee in the staffing business. Like he's got the full back office handled, and I literally told him, I was like, you can save some money and you can shift to a different model. And he's like, I don't want to because I love the ease of this. So it doesn't have to be a big thing to enter the US. I think that's my takeaway here is if you want to enter the US market, you can do so very easily. And that is where the employer of record model does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us about what's new. Tell us about the graduate program you've built.
Yeah, I'm really excited to share this. So this is going to be a very germane conversation especially for your clients, for your listeners who are in the US right now, or they're thinking about getting there and getting to scale pretty quickly. And we'll talk about what that means. So I'm going to say something right now that probably no other employer of record is going to want to say. And that is that at some point, it will make sense for you to graduate from employer of record and take things in-house. And there's a few different reasons for that. And we'll talk about what that sweet spot, that inflection point is. And Andy, I would love for this to be interactive where you share your thoughts on this because you've got, I think, perspective and experience with this. But I'll speak from my side first, which is there's a few factors. Imagine you've got a staffing company, they got 10, 20, 50 workers. Employer of record model, fantastic. But then at some point, they start getting to 100, 150, 200. And there's a few issues that arise. One is sales friction. So there's been a rise in the use of MSPs, managed service providers, and VMSs over the past 5 to 7 years. Significant rise. That includes anti-subcontracting clauses, enterprises wanting to reduce the layers in the staffing cycle for both profit and for compliance reasons. And sometimes using an employer of record can create friction in that sales process. That's not for everybody, but if it slows down your sales cycle, that's an issue. The second one is control. And this is across a number of different areas. So when you work with an employer of record, that EOR has a fiduciary obligation to manage their risk. That means workers' compensation insurance, the insurance in the US that pays workers if they get injured. It's not a public market effectively, it's a private market. And so if you, as the staffing company, come and say you want to place a bunch of workers doing XYZ job, the EOR may not give you that opportunity because their risk appetite may not match your business model. Yep. So you're losing revenue. Same thing with benefits. I mean, I could go through this. There's a lot of control areas. So when you start wanting more control, when you start seeing sales friction, and then third one is optimizing for profitability. And we can talk through the numbers on it, but if you're paying 6, 7, 8% to your employer of record as a percentage of payroll, that's actually not that much money relative to the margin that you generate when you're at 10, 20, 50, even maybe 75 or 100 workers. But at some point when you get bigger, you start looking at 7% of your payroll. That's a really big number. And you're never going to get rid of all of that expense, obviously, even if you took everything fully in-house. but there's a lot of meat on that bone, which, like, I mean, if I was a staffing owner, I would start to look at that somewhere between the 50 to 100, 150. I'd start to take a hard look at that number and figure out how can we optimize for profitability and drop more of that down to the EBITDA line. So, but Andy, I mean, you work with a lot of these staffing companies, and I think you've been through this transition before, and we can talk about the obstacles and the reasons why people don't just take it in house quickly and why they get stuck. But
yeah, I've done this before in the S3 US expansion. We worked with an EOR, had a great experience, and but then it came to the point where we were looking at, could we, is this costing in? Could we do it ourselves? We were quite, as a PLC, quite risk averse, but ultimately, yeah, it made sense to do it. And we actually went through a sort of transition phase where, with the provider, we actually worked it through. They, helped us set it up and, gave us a soft landing into it. I think there's sometimes what's interesting. You talk about control. I think that was the reason, that was the big reason for the move. The MSPs were saying, "Who are these guys? We don't want to work with you guys." And if there's a throat to be choked, it's going to be you. So, and we want our liability flowing down. And the other reason I've seen, you talked about it as well, the risk is super important as well. So having worked in the energy space, renewables, nuclear, just EORs just not interested. Well, they are interested, but they don't want to put this, generally this bit of a book and risk their whole business. So therefore, you're pretty much on your own there, and you have to go and you have to basically start your own. And it's in your name and it's your liability.
And that's a great example of where you almost have to take things in-house, even if you're small, because the workers' comp piece. And that's something, and as an EOR, we have a broader risk appetite than most EORs. I mean, in the past couple of weeks, we've taken some clients because other EORs are saying no to it, but it doesn't mean that we have unlimited, and we have to work with our insurance group, in order to work those things out. It makes sense. I sort of think of it like this. It's like EOR. It's like imagine like loading your family up in a minivan. And is interstate? Is that the right word in the UK? Interstate, like the
motorway.
Motorway. Okay, great. Motorway. This is a new one for me. Fantastic. So imagine you're loading your family up in a minivan. You're getting onto the motorway, right? This is when you're small as a company, you're building, but all of a sudden you start picking up real speed. The one of the real issues with employee records is that when you're getting that speed, and you want to find a safe exit ramp for your family, it can be really hard to do that. And it sounds like maybe you had a slightly, a decent experience, but a lot of founders get stuck, and it's the fear, the stress, the risk of taking things in house leaves them stuck using employer record that used to make a lot of sense but doesn't anymore. And that's basically why we built Turnkey. And Turnkey is a service, Andy, that I described to you recently, which is the part of the thrust of this show. So Turnkey is a new service from Agile Partnering that enables staffing companies that have 50, 100, 200, 300 workers to take everything in-house, but with none of the build. So we effectively come in and do all the things that the employer of record would be doing for them, but it's on their paper. And so it's completely private labeled, and it gives them what they're looking for, which is control, right? It's reducing the sales friction. It's going to be more profit optimized, that is cost reduced for them. And I'm not saying that they'll use it forever, but it can probably easily take them to 500, 750, 1,000 workers and kick that can down the road quite a bit as they continue to grow and scale. And again, the heartbeat of this for us is helping them focus on what matters, which is finding clients, making placements, not to overly simplify. That's really what it's about. So to me, it's just a natural next phase of a growth journey instead of having to go 0 to nothing overnight.
So essentially what it's doing is, you called it private, but it's a white label. It's probably so effectively, if this were me and it's Andy Hallett Consulting, the contracts would go out in the name of Andy Hallett Consulting. Andy Hallett Consulting would be the employer, and effectively you just do everything for me. So pretty much you'd sort the timesheets, you'd sort the invoicing, the collections, you'd help me with the factoring, and like you said, all I've got to do is just go off and sell.
That's right. I'll put a little clarifying, which is basically we're amplifying that power of the back office team. So we do all that back office for you. There is some optionality around it. Some of our clients want to use our funding because it's totally embedded. You don't even have to complete a borrowing base. So we have a sophisticated, essentially ABL facility that's exclusively for turnkey customers. But other clients may want to use their own global facility. Let's say you're working with HSBC, you're already operating in 9 countries, and you want to leverage that facility. You can, I call it BYOB. You can bring your own bank here in the United States. So that's totally fine as well. So my point is, yes, we'll handle all the back office, and there's some optionality around what's going to suit my specific business model.
Got you. And funding for those who are sort of isn't as easy in the US as it is in the UK. The market for certainly recruitment funding isn't as evolved as it is in the UK. So if you can embed that and use that, that's pretty useful. So definitely adds value. So typically with turnkey, who are you seeing? Who are those conversations you've had, and who have you onboarded? What type of companies? Is it that sort of inflection point of 50 people? Actually, the MSPs are knocking on our door saying, we need it to be you.
Yeah, it's interesting for me because I'm learning as we go. I mean, in some ways it's a new product, and in other ways it's what we've been doing for about a decade now. It's just on somebody else's paper, right? But as we've broached this conversation and this employee record, this turnkey model with our clients, I have a number of clients that are saying, hey, we're at 30. We don't even want to, we love the EOR model. We don't want to, we'll probably start looking at this when we get to 50, 60, 70. I've got others that are even a little bit smaller than that. And they're saying, hey, this is attractive enough where we might want to do this now, given our specific clientele. I've got clients with well over, 100, 150, 200 workers, and we're establishing the process of establishing essentially a roadmap to get there. And we're taking into account our current EOR fees and other things. So that's all of our current clientele. And then, we're absolutely working with prospects, many of which are really looking, they're in process of scaling up very quickly. And they might not need it today because they're only, 50, 60 workers, but they're thinking within 18 months, this is going to make a ton of sense for us. So let's have conversations now. I'm going to be interested sort of as I speak with these clients to really begin to see the patterns of who jumped for this and who's going to wait a little bit longer and who's frustrated this wasn't offered last year, that sort of thing.
Apologies if I missed a little bit there. Looks like my connection dropped, but I'm back. I didn't know whether it was you or me filling in, so thank you very much. It's quite a brave commercial move because effectively, I'd imagine your EOR business, the margins, and then we're going to do this. So is that a case of, well, if we didn't do it, someone else would?
Yeah, it's a really thoughtful question, actually, Andy. And I will say I kicked the can on it for probably 9 months and asking myself, what's the real, is this the right thing, not only for our clients, but also for us as a company? And not to get mushy about it, but we're a very values-driven business. Our core values are to serve, to compete, and to create. And I tell my team all the time, you have to perform above market average. Average performance gets the severance check, and you have to live our values, and it has to be both and. And when I think about that value of to serve, what we do is always the same. We really do our best to put ourselves in the shoes of our clients, ask ourselves, what would we want if we were them, and can we go deliver that, right? And that's how I've built the entire business. That's why we grow on referrals. And I just saw these clients, and I'm thinking, if I was the staffing firm owner, I would start to get frustrated when I've got 100, 125 workers, and I would want a different option, and I wouldn't want to have to do that overnight. And then I realized, selfishly, I think it actually has the chance, but it is a risk, right? There is some bravery, some courage involved here. I think it gives us an opportunity to extend the lifetime customer value, because ultimately a savvy operator, when they get to 100, 200 workers, at some point 300, whatever, you guys were at S3, they are going to take it in-house. And if I can take them even a much lower percentage rate at a much higher volume, it's going to work out for me long-term. So that's the bet that I'm making, and time will tell.
Yeah, and the other thing as well is, having sort of looked at the cost of running it yourself as well, it's not just the cost of running it, it's the complexity. So you might have someone really good running it, and then they leave, and then all of a sudden you've got to replace that person. The systems are often bespoke to you. There's that lag, and yeah, it's not just always about the cost; it's about the customer experience. And so potentially you can see those turnkey customers going bigger and bigger and bigger.
That's the belief that I have. And when I speak with savvy operator, I mean, I literally spoke with a guy last week. He went from one contractor to 130 contractors in 18 months. Okay. So, I mean, at least relative to most folks, that is rapid scale. And we're talking about the turnkey model. And he said, Charles, at the end of the day, this is not all about cost. He's like, this is about speed, because if I can pay you a few percentage points, but I can go faster with less stress and less noise, if I can focus on revenue, right, and focus on market penetration, I'm going to make a lot more money. And if you make a few percentage points on the way, relative to what I could do otherwise, that's great. And that's just a savvy operator, right? That's just smart business. So makes sense to me.
Awesome. It sounds like an interesting proposition. And if anyone wants to get hold of you and talk about turnkey, how can they do it?
Yeah, just find me on LinkedIn. My promise is, no pressure, right? I mean, we're just going to bring objective, honest guidance. And what I'll do is either I or somebody from my team, but probably me, because I actually love discovery calls and talking with clients. So I'll hop on the phone with you and we'll do two things. Number one, we'll talk about the control. We'll talk about the elements where maybe your brand is being diluted from an EOR model. We'll talk through those things. And then number two, I'll help you understand the true cost of employee record if you're currently using one, because a lot of times those burdens get muddled, and we can actually provide you real information around the potential cost savings that you're looking at. And then, balls in your court. So yeah, just find me on LinkedIn, Charles Causey, Agile Partnering. And yeah, we'd love to chat. It's been fun, Andy.
It has been fun. Just one last thing. I think a lot of people worry about diving into the US market. What's the one thing you would say to them just to put their mind at rest and make them dive in and go for it?
I would just say start small and start fast. And again, I'm not trying to pitch, but use us or use somebody else, but use a great back office provider where you eliminate virtually all of your liability. And the one thing that matters is focus. So focus on your niche, focus on finding not 20 clients, but one client, right? Find your first contractor, and you can do that in 24 hours or less if you have the right back office partner. So just go test it and run the experiment. That would be my suggestion. That'd be how I would approach it.
Fantastic. Charles, it's been great speaking again, as always. And so no questions. That's fine as well. So we'll end the stream and catch up with you soon.